Welcome back. This show investigates the idea that we could have been here before in a past life. So far, we've seen actor and entertainer Shaun Williamson take part in a regression session where he described the life of Richard, a valiant French knight who died in battle in the early 1300s.
People fighting in it. I can't breathe and I can't move.
What thoughts are going through your head?
That you'll never see the castle and Madeline again.
So what's going on here? Is Shaun seeing a past life he once lived, or is it just wishful thinking? It's up to you to decide what you believe, but it certainly gets you thinking.
I think there's a great deal to do with fantasy, and I think, you know, in terms of being a knight of the realm, it's something you probably did in history class when you were 12 years old, and it's a memory that stayed with you, perhaps at a subconscious level, and you had an emotional reaction to it when you heard about it. How many children do we see playing out these roles on a daily basis? They're not playing out a past life, they're just playing out a fantasy, and that's all it is.
The medieval era is an extremely popular one, as it is with books and films. It was a time of great excitement. There were brave knights and there were beautiful maidens that needed rescuing from villains. And people play these games at places like Nebworth and Hever Castle. They play jousting games and they dress up in medieval outfits. So it's inevitable that this will be a popular era for people to revert to because, again, it's exciting, glamorous, and they have familiarity with it.
I believe that by visiting your past life, you can eliminate certain pains and aches in this life, simply by discovering what happened to you, where the pain emanates from, where it comes from, what happened to you in a past life. If you discover that you were in an accident, but it happened in a past life, then why should the pain follow you? If you discover that, the pain stops in this lifetime.
In a moment, I'll be asking Shaun for his thoughts, but not before we reveal the results of our investigation. Has historian Jules found any facts in this knight's tale?
Shaun's regression story is fascinating because not only does he give us a date, 1315, and a place, Roussillon, he also claims to know his name, Richard Florin, or Richard Florin. Now, a quick look at the data will tell you that Florin, or Richard, is not uncommon across Europe at this time, so whilst it's plausible, it wasn't really definitive. But what about that castle, Roussillon near Rouen?
Does the castle have a name?
Roussillon?
And you were a knight of the castle of Roussillon?
Yes. We fight for the count.
Now, I have found a castle Roussillon, but it's not up here in Rouen, it's down in the southwest of France. But it was owned by a count, just as Shaun described, no less than James I of Mallorca, who held it back in the 14th century. Could this be where Richard Florin really lived?
Throughout Shaun's regression, he gives us some fascinating insights into his daily life. And one of the most memorable is that of Madeline, Richard Florin's love.
What feelings do you have about Madeline?
Love.
This really is the stuff of romantic love and chivalry. Richard and Madeline were of a similar social standing. Knights and ladies-in-waiting paired off all the time, and the noble court was just the place for a bit of romantic intrigue. But even more convincing was Shaun's description of a knight sent away to fight.
Is she someone you're allowed to be with?
No.
How long have you been away fighting?
3 months.
And it's fighting that's taken Richard away from Madeline and his castle in his knightly duty to his count. Knights like Richard swore an oath of allegiance to their lord, so when they were called upon, they would don their armour and take arms, going wherever the action was.
This could actually explain why Shaun mentions Rouen. Lords would often rent out their knights as favours or to earn good hard cash, and that could mean you might be sent anywhere in the country. And it was no bad thing. Fighting for a knight could be a lucrative business. They could earn a fortune from captured prisoners or booty, and many would welcome the chance to get into action. Fighting as a mercenary was a nice little earner. And it's this that might actually explain something else that Shaun mentions.
Who are you fighting against?
The English.
What year is it?
It's 13 or 15.
How do you feel about the English?
I don't hate them.
This seems to suggest that Richard was fighting as a mercenary knight in his battle against the English. But now this is where the real speculation begins.
So can we find any evidence that the English were fighting the French? There is one battle during this time where we know for sure that French knights took on the English, the famous Battle of Bannockburn. This was in the summer of 1314, only a few months before the date Shaun gives us, and the possible location of our knight's untimely death.
What's happened to your neck?
It's been cut. Was knocked off the horse by the pike.
Now, whilst this was a shocker for Richard, I think this is really exciting because there was a weapon that did exactly that. And this is it. It's called a halberd. And as you can see, there's a nasty axe and a spear at this end. And we know that these were used at Bannockburn. One slashing movement from this, and Richard Florin is history.
What thoughts are going through your head about that life?
That you'll never see the castle and Madeline again.
So there we go. A story of a knight, a lost love, and a lonely and brutal death on a blood-soaked battlefield. Shaun certainly is a fantastic story. But is it true? You decide.
Well, your eyebrows raised a couple of times
Wow.
During that.
I couldn't believe it. He found a castle. Because, you know, obviously I'm a big Shakespeare fan, and when I left, I thought, Roussillon's a character from Shakespeare. All's well that ends well, and perhaps it was just floating around in my subconscious. That's what I thought. But the idea that he's found a castle called that is pretty incredible, really.
It's also quite a wine-growing region in France. Do you drink wine from that part of the world?
Been known to. I've taken the odd glass.
But let's
Yeah.
just assume that it's not out of a bottle of wine, and let's assume that it's that it is, you know, this 14th century knight. Is that the sort of past life that you would hope for, that you were expecting?
That's quite spooky. The way that they've reenacted it was quite, especially the look between them of Madeline and Richard was exactly what I envisaged.
And so did that ring true? There were things in there that
Yeah,
took you back
definitely.
to the regression?
Definitely. All I remember is seeing a castle very much like that, and exactly that sort of chainmail as well. Because as I looked down, the chainmail was on my feet and legs.
And did you imagine that that you could perhaps have been a knight for hire, gun for hire, sword for hire?
I didn't realise that this mercenary stuff, or that the Scots hired French mercenaries to help them out at Bannockburn, so that's all totally new to me. I didn't know that at all.
But you're quite obviously knowledgeable about this particular historical period.
I like my history, I won't deny that, but I'm pretty much from the Tudors onwards.
Yeah.
So, no, I've just learned some stuff there, so it's not something that, although I know roughly what happened at that time, it's not something that I could quote accurately to make it up, do you know what I mean?
What about the love affair? How much do you remember of that? How
I
intense
do.
was that?
The way they recreated it was lovely, because I remember giving that cheeky glance, and so a lot of it was, I felt quite unrequited. They wanted to get together, but circumstances wouldn't let them.
But the loss that he felt was quite intense.
I suppose it's a soldier's lot, and still is. Probably guys out in Iraq who haven't seen their families for 3 months, so that's just a lot of the soldier, I suppose. Yeah, I remember him feeling very sad at the time that he couldn't be with her, and particularly when he was dying, thinking about her, and he'd never see his home again. I suppose that's what goes through soldiers' minds all over the world, you know.
The choking, talk about choking. You have this irrational fear, you say, of choking.
Yeah,
What?
I nearly choked. I wouldn't say to death as a child, but I had a bad one where I went red and had to be severely smacked on the back. And ever since then, I've had a sort of, well, is it irrational or not, but a fear of choking, to the point where I used to cut my children's food up very small, and my wife said, no, don't, because you just pass it on, and she's quite right. Doubled with slight claustrophobia, and it seemed to tie in that when this Richard was dying, that he had his throat cut, so he was obviously suffocating on a battlefield, in mud, in armour, and he was choking and couldn't move.
I know that Andrea believes that those things that can happen in past lives, that can be dragged through. That the fact that you have this fear of choking, could be linked to the fact that your knight happened to have been stabbed in the throat by a pike.
Certainly, it seemed to make sense.
You also have another life, which. Now, we don't. People who we've talked to who've been regressed have had a number of lives and gone through different doors. We don't normally talk about those, but there's one other one that that you had, which we're going to mention because it's in such marked contrast to what we've got here. This is the life of Peter Edmonds in the 1930s, whose parents died in a car crash. Lived in Hull.
Tell me about your house, where you live.
Terraced.
Does anyone else live in the house with you? Is there anyone you love and care about?
No.
He was the saddest, most miserable, lonely man. He worked in a canning factory. You say he died of TB in a hospital. Nobody came to see him. It couldn't be more different to that. Where did that come from?
I don't know. I was glad when I came round from that one, but I didn't feel it as strong as the night one.
Do you feel closer to the night or closer to the guy?
No, I feel closer to the night.
Thank goodness for that.
Yeah.
We'll pause there for a second because you've heard what Shaun thinks. You decide for yourself, obviously, but here's what the experts have to say.
Well, I think our desire to have an answer or an explanation for why, let's say, we have a particular phobia drives us towards looking for it in things like past life regression. And if you go in search of an answer, you will find it there because that was your expectation.
Shaun's regression is very much a classic medieval story. Here's this heroic knight who leaves his beloved Madeleine and rides off into battle to fight and give his life for a cause he doesn't really believe in. He then dies with a pike in the throat, and this is interesting, the fact he does have a fear of choking. And it may well be that in his mind this idea of a pike in the throat could perhaps explain from what happened in his past life what currently happens in this.
In Shaun's past life as the knight, we saw him dying in chainmail, which must have been very claustrophobic, and also dying with a spear through his neck. And in this lifetime, he said he's had issues of claustrophobia, and also he wakes up in the night sometimes choking, which is possibly a cell memory of remembering that past life. And because we've cut the ties to that life now, it should, in effect, alleviate those issues of claustrophobia and waking up and choking.
So, let's cut to the chase. What do you believe? Do you believe that we've been here before?
I did believe in that before I was regressed, and I believe in it even stronger now. So I'm delighted that I took part in it, and yes, I do believe that there is an afterlife.
Right, Shaun, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Join us next time for another chance to explore the possibility that we could all have been here before.